What is going on? Welcome back to the Underdog Investor audio experience. My name is Colin, and today I have a little bit of a fun story for you. So, back in 2019, I was in college. I was working on my bachelor degree, and then I ended up getting my master's degree as well. And during those summers where I was not studying, I actually stayed on campus and I started my own sort of like random work around people's houses. I don't know how else to describe it. I would paint houses, I would weed yards. I actually worked on a farm and was shoveling poop of horses and feeding them hay and rebuilding decks and fences. And I just did a whole bunch of random activities. But during that time, I made a bunch of money. I made a bunch of money. And so as a college kid, spending 80 hours a week and just stacking cash, not only did I learn and develop a skill set of networking and sort of marketing, if you will, and attracting customers to my little pseudo business here on the side. Ended up, like I said, ended up working 80 hours a week and had a huge network of 40, I think it was like 40 or 45 houses that I worked on a weekly basis. And anyways, that was if you're young and you have the ability to do that, I highly recommend it. It was a blast. I learned a lot of skills and stuff like that. But ultimately, what I'm trying to describe here is that I worked hard, I learned a skill set, I made a bunch of money for doing so, and then I was sitting on this pile of cash. And so I'm sitting in my dorm room. 2020 comes around. I'm sitting in my dorm room. I have a bunch of cash sitting in my bank account, and I started to learn more about investing. And so I started going to like Dave Ramsey. I started going to a couple of different sources to learn about. Actually, Rich Dad Poor Dad is when that came into my purview, and I started reading that. That world, that book changed my life as well. But really, I started to learning about, okay, now I have this money, now I have this cash. What do I do with it? And I think a lot of people that I was surrounded with were leaning me towards go spend that on something, go buy something, right? Go buy a liability. But as I was studying Rich Dad Poor Dad and Robert Kiyosaki's work, I was like, no, I actually want to invest this money, but I don't know where to invest it. So I started learning about stocks. I started learning about like the classic, right? Stocks and bonds and index funds and dividend funds. And I said, okay, all this looks really interesting. I want to start to do this. Then the 2020 came around, the pandemic happened, and the world sort of flipped upside down. And it was kind of a perfect storm for me when I think about it, looking back, because was sitting on a bunch of cash. I see stock prices completely plummet because a lot of these services had to go offline. Airlines shut down, cruise ships shut down, and there was a few other things that I invested in as well. But basically, I took that time to look at the industry, look at the financial market, and say, okay, I've learned from Warren Buffett that the best time to accumulate, to buy assets, or to buy and to purchase and move into investments is when there are times of panic, when there are times of downward trends. And so I was looking at a bunch of things. I bought a bunch of airlines. That was the one that I spent the most on because my investor thesis was that during the pandemic, early in the pandemic, a lot of these airlines had to shut down. Therefore, their stock price sort of plummeted, right? A lot of them sometimes even cut in half. And I was looking at these airlines saying, okay, I'm going to take an educated guess and say that these airlines will be back in the future. That Southwest and that American Airline and United, that these massive conglomerates of air travel will be back online at some point in the future. And that's what I think investing is. Investing is looking at market trends, looking at macro events, and then looking at the individual projects or the individual businesses, like what I'm talking about here, but kind of moving into crypto now, looking at these projects, looking at what problems they solve, and thinking, will this be more valuable in the future? And so, because I had a bunch of cash sitting on the sidelines, and because I was being equipped with the mindset of an investor I think at an early age, I was able to purchase a bunch of stock in these airlines, which within 20, I think it was like 12 or 14, 24 months. I forget exactly when I started selling, but I made some massive profits. I'm talking about 200 to 300% gains in the stock market. That's unheard of with these massive companies. And so I'm not saying to go do that. All I'm trying to communicate here is that we're doing the same thing in crypto. We are finding undervalued assets that you believe will be worth more in the future. And so take the time, study these assets, study these projects, find solid footings, and then look for good entry prices. And that's when times are red and people are panicking. That's a good time to enter. Not financial advice, of course, but that's what we do in the UIG, and that's what I like to do as an investor myself. So hopefully this brought you some value today. Make sure you go back through the investor challenge, hop in our live streams. We have a roundtable call on Wednesdays now. We have a hot seat session on Thursdays, and the end of week report comes out on Friday. So lots of great ways to get plugged into the UIG. And with that being said, let me know if this was valuable to you, and we'll see you in the next episode.